So this is weird, right? I could give you the most compelling, most heartfelt talk I've ever given, and it would fall completely flat, right? I'm with you, but I'm not really with you. So I turn my back to make the point, right? But the question is, how often are we face to face with people and still not really connecting with them? We live in the most technologically connected time in the history of civilization. And yet, levels of loneliness and disconnection have doubled since the 1980s. And with the pandemic and with remote work, it's not helping. There's something that we can do about that. Weak social connection is actually bad for our health. Vivek Murthy, who is the US Surgeon General, has found that weak social connection is connected to heart disease, anxiety, and depression. And it reduces our lifespan the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And these feelings of loneliness and disconnection are not only bad for us as individuals, but they're extremely unhealthy for our organizations as well. When people show up to work feeling lonely and disconnected, they experience unhealthy stress, burnout, fear, and doubt. What I found through my own experience and through working with leaders and teams all over the planet is that this feeling of disconnection is highly connected to a lack of trust in either an individual or an organization. So how is trust built or broken? Simple example, you expected when I came out onto the stage, you expected me to face you. But your experience was very different from what you expected. One of the ways that we can tell how trust is built or eroded is in the relationship between our positive expectation and experience, right? When we have a positive expectation of an individual or an organization that's based on what they've promised or what they advertise, and our experience matches up with that, trust is built. When, on the other hand, our positive expectation does not match up with the experience we have, trust is eroded or is difficult to establish to begin with. When we're trying to match the experiences that we create for people with the expectation that they actually have, it is a combination of both what we are doing and who we are being. Right, let me give you an example. Think about your favorite teacher. Doesn't matter what year of school. I want you to raise your hand and tell me their name and what subject they taught. Go ahead.
Miss Aaron, second grade math.
Okay, Miss Aaron, second grade math.
Mr. Bowman, fourth grade spelling teacher.
Fourth grade spelling teacher. Okay, who else? Go ahead.
Mrs. Ruff, my third grade homeroom teacher.
Okay, all elementary school, third grade homeroom teacher.
Nacho Cordova, rhetoric.
Rhetoric, okay, interesting. So the interesting thing is that a lot of other teachers could have taught you math or reading or rhetoric, how to dissect a frog, how to speak French, how to use that math you never used again after you took the test, right? But it wasn't just about what they were doing, it's who they were being. It's how they showed up, it's the way that they made you feel. And every leader, every great leader I've had has had this amazing opportunity or has practiced the art of who they were being. Now, that doesn't always work out the way that we want it to. In 2015, I was co-facilitating a workshop with my friend Peter for our team at an offsite at a cabin in Aspen, Colorado. When I say cabin, I mean this mansion built of tree trunks. The place was huge. Shed was there, he remembers. And I got up and started the workshop, and I gave my bit, and then I handed the baton over to Peter. And Peter came up, and he built on what I had said for a couple of minutes, and then proceeded to do his part of the presentation. It was my turn again, and I gave my bit, flipped it back over to Peter, and again, he came up and started talking and building on what I had said, giving more context, sharing more examples, giving more depth. And I'd never experienced Peter like this before in the few times that we had facilitated together. And it was weird to me, because every time that he would get up, he would say more about what I had just said. And it started to mess with my head and with my confidence. And I thought, am I missing the point? Am I not really, does he not think that I have a grasp on the content that we're delivering? And I found myself saying less and less because I knew he would just get up and say more and more. And there was this weird dynamic. It was awkward to be around him for the rest of the offsite. And on the way back to the airport, we shared a rental car. And we made some small talk, but every once in a while I thought to myself, do I bring this up or do I just let it go? I was afraid. Peter was older than I was. He had way more experience than I did, and I had never had a difficult conversation with him. And it was like a 3.5-hour drive to the airport. I didn't want to make it weird. So every one of my senses was telling me, just let it go. And so I said something. And I told him how he had made me feel and what I had experienced. Now, I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story of Peter yet, because I want to bring up a point. It's often easy for us to recognize or realize when we are on the receiving end of these unexpected experiences, right? Somebody throws us under the bus, or they say something behind our back and we find out, or they leave us hanging when we expect them to come through on something. It's easy to see those things happening to us. I'm a student of Stoic philosophy. And one of the core tenets of Stoicism is recognizing what is in our control and what is not in our control. As many of those unexpected experiences as we might have, there is nothing we can do about what happens to us, what other people, the experience other people create for us. The only thing we can control is our minds, our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, right? So rather than focusing on being the victim of unexpected experiences, I want to flip this a little bit and talk about how do we take responsibility to make sure that the experiences we're creating for others are consistent. How do we create experiences that are consistent and that meet the positive expectations they have of us based on who we are, what we value, and what we believe, right? I had a leader who did this extremely well. I want to take you back to when I was 17 years old. I found myself working behind the counter of a bagel shop, smearing veggie cream cheese on an onion bagel, or onion cream cheese on a plain bagel, or plain cream cheese on a cinnamon raisin bagel. I don't know. It all blended together. It was all the same day in, day out. This was a go nowhere, minimum wage, job that was 30-minute drive from my house. It was downtown, so I had to park in a parking garage a block away and walk through some creepy back alley to get to the employee entrance. There was a lunch rush like you would not believe every day at noon with a line out the door. The guy who owned the shop was so demanding, and I was required to wash my hands so often, they were literally red all the time. I have compared every other job I have had to that job because it was the best job I've ever had. Yeah, some of the circumstances weren't ideal. But Ben, this guy who owned the shop, had a way of being. He created an environment where we felt trust and connection and love. We loved being there. We loved the job, we loved him because of not only what he was doing, but who he was being. The reason he was demanding was not because he was just picky about details. It was because he genuinely believed that every single one of us had greatness inside of us. How stupid is that for a part-time bagel shop job? But it's just the kind of guy he was. It's how he showed up to everything. Who he was being made a huge difference. And every one of the people in my life who have had the biggest impact on me have practiced this art of being. And they do that by embodying 3 common traits, which are honesty, humility, and humanity. Now, before I dive into these just really briefly, a couple things to keep in mind. These are traits. They are in the realm of being. And every single one of them requires a daily practice of doing behaviors that represent what these things are. The second thing is, great leaders don't define themselves by these things. Yeah, I'm pretty much the most humble person I know. Right? We can't call ourselves these things. The only thing that defines us as these things are when other people choose to define us using these words. So let's dive in just really quickly and talk about each one of these. Being honest means that what we profess to stand for, what we believe, is actually in line with our behavior. What do we do to be honest? First, it's a prerequisite, we have to know what those values are. We have to write them down, we have to be conscious of them, and then we have to turn them into verbs. We have to be able to do it. What does it look like when we do those things? So that's the prerequisite. The practice, and again, I'm giving you an idea. This is going to look different for everybody, but a practice is take those actions, those behaviors that represent what it means to live into your values, and put sticky notes on your computer, on your mirror, wherever it is, on the screensaver of your phone. And in every interaction that you have, ask yourself, how can I incorporate one or more of these behaviors into the meeting I'm about to run, the interview I'm about to have, the Zoom meeting that I'm about to have, the email that I'm about to write? Everything, we can incorporate these behaviors, these actions that represent what we stand for and what we believe in into everything we do. Second is the trait of humility. Being humble means that we are able to recognize our weakness without defensiveness and our strengths without letting ego get in the way. Humility is not about being meek or weak or inferior. It comes with absolute confidence in our abilities, our talents, our gifts, the things we're good at, not to lift ourselves up, but how do we use those things to lift up the people around us? Right? Humility is not thinking less of ourselves, it's thinking of ourselves less. So what do we do to be humble? A couple of practices, a couple of ideas, right? When this positive spotlight is on us, share it. There is very little that we do individually that's of any worth that we do on our own. We have people that support us, that are thinking partners, that actually work on the project, whatever it is. Once that positive spotlight is on us, how do we share it? How do we share that spotlight with others? Second, when you're in a group setting, be the last to speak so that you have the opportunity to listen to all of the other ideas, opinions, thoughts that other people have. That when you're in a leadership position, when you speak first, everyone tends to agree with you. So speak last and hear what everybody else has to say. The third trait is the trait of human. To be human in this context means that we have a genuine concern and care for the human experience we create for the people around us. How do we make them feel valued and valuable? Couple of things here. How to be human, right? When a team member, a family member, a friend crosses your mind, take 15 seconds, pull out your phone and send them a text and just say, hey, I was thinking about you. You crossed my mind. How you doing? It's these little things, folks, that make such a big difference, that help people to feel like they're seen and valued. Another thing, send a thank you note, a thank you card, instead of a thank you email. The extra time and energy that it took you to write that out, put a stamp on it, stick it in the mail, makes a difference. The time and energy that we spend on people makes such a difference in how they feel. When we embody these traits of honest, humble, and human, it helps us to build that trust and human connection. And trust and human connection make such a difference in the health and survival of our teams and organizations. Let me explain that a little bit. Every single successful company that I know of cares about things like growth, employee well-being, retention, performance, right? And all of those things are inextricably tied to human beings. When people feel disconnected, when they don't trust the people who lead them, self-preservation takes over, and sustainable progress is a continual uphill battle. I want to broaden the perspective a little bit, because I think even more importantly, forming trust and human connection gives us a more meaningful human experience. Linda Ellis wrote a poem called The Dash. Some of you may know what that poem is. It represents or talks about how we represent a person's life. We usually talk about when it started and when it ended. But what we often miss is the most important part, which is the dash, right? The dash is about how we lived. It's who we were when it mattered most. It's how we're remembered. It's how people talk about us. It's the difference that we made, the legacy that we leave. These dates represent my mother's life. She died very unexpectedly last year, a week ago, this month. And she is an example to me of making the most of our dash. She wasn't perfect, but she woke up every single day committed to compassion and service and connection with people that were around her. To borrow a verse from the poem, "For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash." Thanks very much.